You all to the historic Starlight Ballroom on the Lawler Historical Society's third Town Hall Forum. We want to give special thanks to Kurt and Anita Franzen for allowing us to use the space. We also want to recognize and thank the members of the Friends of the Lawler Historical Society who come in and help us set this all up. We load our trailers on Wednesday night and we have Thursday and Friday to create this whole display. It's a lot of work. So thank you, Friends of the Lawler Historical Society. Okay, we are delighted to have you all here. And we are honored to have 4 very special guests on our panels. We have Jen Costigan, Mabel Kroll-Banwell, Roger Kroll, and Bill Sheridan. Okay, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about each speaker before I hand the microphone over to Bill, in no specific order. Okay, Jen Kennan Costigan is a native of Lawler. She was born and raised about 3 miles north of Lawler on the farm where Paul and Gertie Kennan now live. She is the oldest of 9 children of Ed and Emma Kennan. She graduated from Lawler High School in 1948, and then she entered the Sisters of the Presentation in Dubuque. She worked as a teacher and a principal, and after 19 years, she left the convent, came back to Lawler to help her brother-in-law, Lauren, raise his 11 children. They eventually married, had 3 more children, and together they raised those 14 beautiful Costigan kids. Bill Sheridan currently resides in Johnston, and he grew up right here in the streets of Lawler. He graduated from Lawler High School in 1962, and he has been a freelance writer for over 40 years, a radio personality, and a high school English and speech teacher. He also was a trainer, or currently maybe still is, a trainer for Fortune 500 companies. He authored a very special book, very near and dear to all of us, The Depot Street Memories, The Lawler Stories. And it's based on his life growing up in Lawler. Welcome, Bill. Mabel Kroll-Banwell is the 3rd child of Richard and Leona Kroll. She was born in Hampshire, Illinois, and moved to Iowa at the age of 8. She attended Lawler schools through the 10th grade, and then she was sent to attend Immaculate Conception Academy in Dubuque. That's where she graduated from high school, and then she went on to Mount Mercy in Cedar Rapids to get her teaching degree. She returned to Lawler and taught for 4 years at a little schoolhouse north of town, and then she met the love of her life, George Banwell. Together they had 8 children. She continued being a substitute teacher for many years. She sold Avon products, and I think she's now most known for her beautiful flower gardens between Nashua and Ionia. Welcome, Mabel. And then last we have Roger Kroll. He is the 5th of 10 children born to Richard and Leona. Born in Hampshire, Illinois, they moved to Lawler in 1939, where Richard started the blacksmith shop down on Highway 24. Roger attended high school here, graduating in 1956, and he might hold every basketball record there is for Lawler High. He went on to Loras College and then to Wisconsin State. He returned to Lawler to work with his dad in the blacksmith shop, but in 1964 he had a little bit different vision, and he thought maybe Lawler could use a ready-mix plant. So he started his first ready-mix plant in Lawler, not knowing that 57 years later that vision would include cement plants, quarries, and sand pits across 11 states in the central United States. He resides on his ranch in Wyoming. He remains active in the business. He goes into work every day to keep Kurt in line, and that is Roger Kroll. Okay, I'll turn the mic over to Bill Sheridan. If you need to sit, please do, and hold the mic up really close to your mouth so we get the best effect.
I was really happy to get an applause before I started because I probably didn't get it thrown out after I finished. It just, oh, by the way, I graduated from Turkey Valley. I was the second graduating class from Turkey Valley, but everything else was accurate. It's just a thrill for me to be doing this again, and especially with two women and then this ugly critter next to me, the name of Roger. But before we start, I'd like to do two things. I'd like to a round of applause, not just for these wonderful people that set this up, but for all the volunteers that have done so much work in the tents and the play stuff and just everything, lighting up bands and so forth. A big hand of applause for all the volunteers. And also, on a little bit of a sad note, in just a minute, I'm going to ask you to bow your head. If you're the brain type, say a silent prayer for our friend Dick Blazik. Dick had so much to do with the first 10 Irish Fest, and if you happen to have his book, the Lawler books, he was greatly responsible for very much of that. And the last time I saw him was standing right over here in between these two tables, and I see there's a picture of it. And just for a minute, let's just drop our heads in honor of Dick. Thank you. Well, I'm really, I'm glad to be talking up here with the women, but especially Roger, because Roger, before he became Lawler's version of Warren Buffett, he was my mechanic. And I graduated from high school in 1962, and I worked in the bank, the Lawler Bank, for a year and a half before going to college to become an English teacher. And during that time, I had purchased a 1950 Nash Rambler, pink and black, with a Continental kit and lay-down seats. And my buddies called it the Mayflower because all the girls had supposedly came across in it. But if that was true, it should have been called the Virgin. My notes here. So when I met Roger today, he shook my hand and he said, "I have something for you." And I thought he was going to give me a gift. And boy, was I wrong. He said, "Bill, you know, when I was a mechanic with my dad, we put in spark plugs. And I just noticed on the ledger, you owe me $10. And so apparently his 2,000 acres isn't doing too well out in Wyoming. And I reluctantly handed him a 10, and he said, "Well, actually now it's, with inflation, that's $114.32. Roger does not know it, but he really is kind of a hero of mine for many reasons, particularly in basketball. People who are under 60 cannot possibly understand how important high school sports were back in the 1950s and early 60s for us. We didn't have all the distractions. Today, people go up to Minnesota and watch the Twins or the Vikings, or go down to Kansas City, watch the Royals or the Chiefs, or maybe even Chicago. Back then, we weren't doing things like that. We were going to high school ball games. And what a thrill it was to be in that gym up there on top of the hill, where, if you've seen the movie Hoosiers, you get some idea what it was like, because we were at the top level, looking down at the players, and the bad guys from the fans from Fredericksburg or Wacoma or St. Lucas, wherever, were on the same floor as we were, so it got to be very interesting. But I love basketball, and I go back, and John Tierney, Roger Crow, Buddy, his older brother, Donnie Benz, my brother Mike Sheridan, Eddie McGreevy, and the Scallies, the Crowes and McGreevy's, all were very athletic. So both families had some excellent ball players, and which also reminds me of those who were here last year know that I live in the Des Moines area, and my two grandsons went to Dowling, and my oldest boy is very good friends with Caitlin Clark. He's a year older than her, and so with the school, with her all through grade school and high school, and then when he graduated, he went to the University of Iowa, and so we got to see Caitlin make those crazy shots when she was 15, 16, 17 years old. We didn't see her so much as a senior because he had graduated. We didn't go to too many games, but the next year she went to Iowa, and she and our grandson have remained good friends to this day. And he tells me, I asked him recently, I said, has Caitlin got the big head? And he said, no, she's just the same old Caitlin, which is a wonderful tribute to her family and schools that she went to. But you know, they did not retire her high school jersey because it was not 22. I forget what the number was, but at the time they had one number, even numbers for home games and odd numbers for away games. So they did not retire her jersey. But Iowa, at Iowa, of course, they did. And because they said that she's the best basketball player that ever has come or is or will come to the University of Iowa, and so they retired her jersey number 22. And also with NIL, name something in impression and likeness, that's when she started making her money. And as a matter of fact, I think her goal in life is to make money so that somehow she can catch up to Kroll. So I got thinking about retiring her jersey. So I asked Nancy, I said, who's the men's coach at Turkey Valley? And she said it was Johnny Iver. So I gave Johnny a call. And I said, Johnny, my name is Bill Sheridan. I graduated in Turkey Valley, played basketball there, 61 to 62. And I wondered if you give any consideration to retiring my jersey. He said, well, God, what a good coincidence, Bill. We actually are. I got looking at your records, and you said that Caitlin, they retired hers because she's the best that's ever come through. We're retiring your jersey for exactly the opposite reason. I said, well, what about NIL? I said, I understand that they're going to start paying some former athletes. Would you consider doing that for me? She said, in your case, NIL means no one is lousier. So before we turn the microphone over, I'm going to read just a couple brief stories. I have been a freelance writer thanks to Mrs. McGreevy. I had to work to make a living doing other things, but I've been writing things since probably 1972, 73. I had an article in a picture magazine back in that called Return to Lawler, talking about taking my kids here, and what a great thrill it was for me to do that. And I did one on Billy Bruckle of the Jericho Community Echo. Some of you old timers will remember that. And so this is a story that I was in the New Hampton Tribune and the Kelmer Courier. I'm going to sit down and read this one. It's called, I guess it doesn't have a title. Folks have occasionally asked me a very simple question that may have a simple answer. What is it with you and your love affair with your hometown of Lawler? Then they correctly point out that I have not lived there for more than 5 decades, and now it's 6 decades. Truth be told, Lawler is mostly a magnet in my mind, one that keeps pulling me back. And to many of you who read this, no matter how old you are, or how long since you moved away, or where you live, or even if you never moved away, your answer about your hometown may be better than mine. The one that makes the most sense to me is that it takes me back to my roots, literally and figuratively, to my oldest friends, to all my beginnings, to the time that was and is no more, with people who were and are no more, to buildings that no longer exist and to businesses that no longer exist, and laughter that was laughed, and tears that were shed, and arguments that were argued, and games that were won and lost and tied, and lessons that were learned, and failures that were lessons, and fears that were overcome. For a full year after I wrote People Street Memories, the Lawler stories, I received absolutely heartwarming emails, letters, phone calls, and in-person comments from people sharing their stories with me. I appreciated each and every one, but 3 of the most encouraging came from a man in New York, a man in Florida, and a woman in California. They obviously had gotten the book through people who lived here or whatever. All 3 said essentially the same thing. I've never been to Lawler. I've never even been to Iowa. You grew up in a town of 500. I grew up in a city of millions. But in a way, I did grow up in Lawler, just like you, in my little Italian, Irish, German neighborhood. Your stories brought back many wonderful stories of my childhood. So there you have it. Now you have a little sense of my affection for my hometown, a small village in northeast Iowa. You may be from Fort Atkinson, Festina, Fort Dodge, San Jose, Miami, Kansas City, or any place in America. My hope and prayer is that you share some of my enthusiasm for your past, your hometown. Amen. And another one comes out of, it was one of the stories I wrote in People Street Memories. By the way, the book is out of print, but it can be bought as an e-book for you that read some of your books online for $3. And you better hurry because it's only going to be there for another 25,000 years. This one is called Don the Junk Man. I cannot ever remember desiring to be younger than my chronological age. Perhaps it's even more true now that I'm in my mid-70s, and now I'm in my early 80s. When there's more to see in my rearview mirror than through the binoculars looking ahead. If we let Him, I believe the Lord will give us the opportunity to see the people and events in our lives in a new light. It has been a remarkable experience for me to recall friends and acquaintances that were gifts that I had taken for granted. I grew up in the small village of Lawler, Iowa in the 1950s. At the time, it was comprised of about 500 or so, mostly Irish Catholic. It sounds like a cliche that times were simpler back then, but it is a fact. Times were simpler back then. It was pre-TV, and then only in black and white television for years. There were no microwaves or automatic dishwashers. Cars did not have turn signals. Instead, drivers in good weather stuck their hand out the window straight to indicate a left turn and upright to indicate a right turn. One thing about Lawler, you didn't have to use your signals because everybody knew where you're going anyway. There were no FM radio stations, no computers, no internet. Walking on the moon was science fiction. Movie theaters played double features, and all the families had burn barrels in their backyards to dispose of waste. And that's how Don Bemis fits into the picture. Although the word entrepreneur was not in our vocabulary at the time, that is exactly what he was. Don owned a horse and a wagon with big tires on it in the summer, and sleds in the winter became his stock and trade. He called on citizens of Lawler once or twice a month to haul our garbage and burn barrel ashes out to the city dump several miles south of town. There were no ordinances about what could be thrown in that pit in those days, so it was a veritable treasure hunt for young boys like me who hitched a ride to him on his route. He was a civil guy who lived in the west end of the main drag with his parents and siblings. Looking back, I'm guessing that Don was probably in his 30s when his draying business occurred. I never saw him in anything other than bib overalls and recall the calluses on his hand from throwing junk of all kinds onto that trailer. He was never in a hurry. The horse had one speed, and so did Don. He was very content with that snail's pace way of living. We could not have imagined that one day we'd be living in a world of recycling, no burning, and powerful machines that lift the garbage cans high into the air, delivering contents into the back of the truck, with no human hands touching the material. These trucks roar off from house to house in less than a minute, repeating the action again and again, making a loud noise in the process. I know it makes perfect sense to do it the new way, but sometimes I get just a little nostalgic for Don Bemis's horse-drawn wagon and the clippity-clop sound of his stalwart equine partner heading south of town with 2 or 3 of us riding along to pass the day. And I thank God that Don Bemis was part of my past.